Warm-up 61, number 1, construct and label an equilateral triangle. So an equilateral triangle means all sides are equal, and you can show that either by putting this line right here on each of those sides. That means those are all equal. Or you can mark the angles with that mark right there, and either of those two ways show that's an equilateral triangle. This shape right here, we just said that with a mark here and a mark here, that means two sides are the same. So what kind of triangle is that, did we say? Isosceles. I'm not sure I know how to spell isosceles. Anybody look it up?
Go down to the next week.
So you could look right there, or you could look at somebody else's paper that looked it up like I did, or maybe that already knew how to spell it. I'm not sure. So isosceles, because two are the same, that is isosceles. And now let's name it for the angles. So there's two acute angles and one obtuse angle. So what does that make this triangle, Carell? Obtuse. So it's an obtuse isosceles triangle. You should have both of those names there. All right. Any questions on that one? All right, 2, a rectangular pyramid is sliced horizontally. What 2D figure describes the shape? Which way is horizontally? Side to side. So we're going to cut it right here, side to side. What else would we call that besides horizontally? Is that parallel to the base or perpendicular to the base? Parallel to the base is also that way. And in our notes that we know if we cut it this way horizontally, we will see what shape the base is. What shape is the base? That's not a square, it's, look, it's a rectangular pyramid. That makes it a rectangle. If we had sliced it vertically this way, vertically or perpendicular to the base, what shape would we have seen? A triangle, right? Remember, if you cut it perpendicular or vertically, you see the shape of the sides. If you cut it parallel or horizontal, you see the shape of the base. Questions? No. Okay. All right. Put your warm up to the side. Make sure that you've picked up the 2 pages of notes. And you need your journal. And the first thing we're going to do is we're going to take some notes on just a page in our journal, the next 2 available pages in our journal. All right, so page 122, that's this left paper right here. We're going to turn it this way and take some notes. So that's your left paper right there. If you don't have your journal, you need to get like a sheet of white paper over from the student office area or something. There's 2 groups to survey. We're going to make kind of a diagram to help us look at that. 2 groups to survey. So when you're going to take a survey and you're going to collect some data, you need to think about what it is the population that you're trying to survey. So the whole group, we talked about this last week, is called the population. So just draw a big circle. Big circle. So everyone inside that group is called the population. So sometimes you can survey the entire population. Sometimes that's a little bit too difficult. So you might take what out of that population? What's that other vocabulary word? A sample. You might take a sample. And that sample should represent the entire population. Right? So if you can't survey everybody, you can go out and you can take just a sample. Okay, so today we're going to do a little bit of data, and we're going to take a survey, and we're going to try to make sure that it represents the entire 7th grade population, and then we're going to try to make some educated decisions or guesses about that population. So our sample today is going to be you guys in this classroom, but the population is going to be the 7th grade, all 7th grade students. But when we do a survey, it's going to be you guys this morning. All right, so we're going to make a flow chart to help us decide if the data that we collect is valid or not valid, biased or unbiased. So now we're going to go down to this bottom page. So if you take a survey, write survey up at the top. And then if you take a survey, you can either take a survey from a sample group or from the entire population. So a sample group means some people in that population. The population means everybody, right? And remember, we said that we are looking for unbiased data. So anytime that you survey an entire population, we're going to call that unbiased. That's good. Your data, you can usually count on it. It's unbiased, and it would also be valid. If you made sure that if you talk to the population, it's going to be unbiased and it's going to be valid. These are both good things. It's what you want. Okay? But if you collect data from a sample of the population, you have to be careful. Sometimes you're going to get biased or not valid data, and sometimes it's going to be unbiased and valid. So we're going to create a flow chart to help us look at that. So biased, and biased, is that good or bad? Do you remember? Bad, frowny face. You can collect biased data or not valid. We're going to look at the ways that make it biased and not valid. Frowny faces. Good. You zoom in a little bit. All right. Or you can collect unbiased. And remember, that's good. And if it's unbiased, then it would be valid. You can trust the results. So let's look at some of the ways that if we collect our data, it is going to be biased and not valid. So one of the things that we learned about in our vocabulary is a convenient sample. So if I collect a convenient sample, that is biased and not valid. Do you remember what a convenient sample is? Somebody that's, yeah, it's convenient to the person that's collecting the data. So if you were trying to collect information about who in Ringgold would like a fast food restaurant, and you just went to the playground one morning for 30 minutes, do you think you're going to get valid data? No. You need to make sure that you go to several different places, several different times a day, several different days of the week, right? Yes, question? Can I zoom in some more? Okay? Right. Right. Exactly. All right. And so another way, what's the other thing we talked about? Do you remember? A voluntary response sample. Do you remember what that is?
People who volunteer to take this.
Right? People that just volunteer to go out of their way to answer a survey. So voluntary response sample is also biased and not valid. So, when you're taking a survey, if you do a sample of the population, make sure you don't do either of these two things because it would be biased and not valid. So let's talk about a couple of the ways that we can collect data, and it will be valid and it will be not biased. So if we want unbiased and valid, we could take, we've already talked about these in our vocabulary, a simple random sample. And that's good. So if I was going to collect data about 7th graders at this school, I might, you know how I have locker duty right after 3rd block. So I might just stand down there and just ask random people when they walk by and make sure it's not just my students, but students from the other team. That might be a way to take a simple random sample. But I would have to make sure that I ask boys and girls from all classes. But that's a simple random sample. The other kind is a systematic random sample. And that's where you have a system in place. So that could be where I went to every 7th grade class and asked maybe 4 boys and 4 girls. That's putting a system in place. So systematic random sample. That would also be a valid way to collect data so that it's unbiased. All right, you have any questions about any of those? All right, so as you're doing work through this unit, you may need to go through and look at this flow chart sometimes to help you see if survey information is valid. All right, so we're going to kind of do our own little survey today and do a little practice with this learning task right here. Is it valid? Now, the first thing I can tell you is it may seem like this would be biased because it feels like it's a convenient sample if we're just doing it with these people in the room. So it would not be what I would do to collect data, but we don't have time to go out and talk to people and collect data randomly. So it feels like a convenient sample, but we just need to get some data really quick so we can practice with it. Part 1, a survey is a method of collecting information. These pieces of information, numbers and facts, are called data or data. I've heard it said both ways, and I actually say it 2 different ways. Just depends on my mood, I guess. I don't know. Describe your class survey. In the space below, compile the data collected by your classmates. We're just going to do it really quickly. All right, so the first thing we're going to do is collect data about hair color. Pick a hair color that you feel like yours most closely represents. Your choices are going to be blonde, red, and black. Brown, blonde, red, or black. So pick a hair color and choose that one. Don't vote more than one. Like, I have some brown pieces in there and I have some blonde pieces in there. So I voted in both. No, pick one color and stick with it. All right? So raise your hand if you think that your hair is mostly brown. Brown hair, raise your hand. So, and leave it up. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. Okay, let's go 13. All right, blonde. Raise your hand if you think your hair is mostly blonde. 1, 2, 3. 3. Red. Anybody with red hair? No gingers in the room. Black. You have black hair. Raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4. 4. All right. Do you think that maybe represents most of the population? Do you think most people have brown hair?
Yes.
Seems like it. Not as many blondes and black hair. And red is a little bit more little less common, right? So I think that's pretty representative. All right. So we had 20 people vote. Is that right? Yes. Okay. Do you carry a cell phone? So if it's a no, raise your hand.
Wait, like ever?
Most of the time, do you have your cell phone? If you're not at school, do you carry a cell phone? So 3 no's. 3 no's. So 17 yeses. All right, now thinking about your cell phone, pick one of these categories to raise your hand. Okay, so if you send 0 to 20 text messages, 21 to 40 or more than 40 a day. So think which category you're going to vote in. Don't change your mind. This is not, if you voted the wrong category, we're going to take your phone away or take your thumbs away or anything like that. Pick one category. Are you going to be 0 to 20, 21 to 40, or more than 40? All right, so get ready to raise your hand. Okay, if you say you send 0 to 20 a day, raise your hand up high. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. If you voted you don't carry a cell phone, you probably should have raised your hand at 0 to 20. Raise your hand again. 0 to 20. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. All right, 21 to 40. You said 21 to 40. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And more than 40.
What is wrong with you?
Shall we finish our math lesson? Sure. Yes, we shall. Okay. All right, here we go. About how much time do you spend on homework on a daily basis? And we're thinking like Monday through Thursday. We're not talking about the weekend. Here we go. These are your categories. Think about which one you're going to vote in. 0 to 15, 16 to 30 minutes, 31 to 45 minutes, 45 minutes to 60 minutes, or more than 60 minutes, more than an hour. You need to pick one category that you're going to vote in. Through the whole week. I'd say this is a daily vote.
Oh, okay.
This is about how much time you would spend daily. And those of you that are saying 0, your grades are reflecting that you are 0, not spending any time on your homework. So just so you know, there's usually a correlation to how much time you spend doing your work and what your grade is.
Does in-school count?
If you're like in 6th block, you can work on homework. That counts. So we're talking about homework. How much time? Okay. Here we go. If you say 0 to 15 minutes a day, raise your hand. Anybody spend 0 to 15 minutes a day? 2. 16 to 30.
I don't think Aiden's here. Oh, yeah, he is.
2, 3, 4, 5. Marcus here.
Yeah, Marcus is here.
Get the message. Oh, you didn't? Okay. 31 to 45. 31 to 45. 1, 2. 46 to 60.
So 8 on this one. Matt read
2.
on the 31 3.
Okay, so 3. More than an hour. Anybody spend more than an hour a day? Okay. All right. What month were were you born? Or what month were you born? So think about it. Your categories are going to be January to March. That's January, February, or March. The next one you can vote in is April, May to June. July, August, September, or October, November, December. We're going to collect quarters or 3 months at a time. So if your birthday is January, February, or March, raise your hand. Raise it up high so I can see it. January, February, or March. 1, 2, 3. April, May, or June. April, May, or June. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. July, August, or September. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. October, November, or December. All right. So there are the results of our survey. So now we can look at that and we can answer some questions. What is the population of our survey? So what would we say the population of our survey would be? So remember we said we are collecting about 7th graders at Ringgold Middle School. So what was our sample size first? 20. But the population is 7th grade RMS students. So we surveyed 20 students, but our entire population is 7th grade RMS students. Did our class just perform a census or a survey? Do you remember what we said a census is? A census is where you go through and you ask every single person in the population. So we did a survey. We did not go through and ask every single person. Do you see how much time that would take to do something like that if we asked every single person to answer those questions? How would you record your results from question 1 as a piece of data? So question 1 is, what color is your hair? So how would we maybe collect that data? I maybe would do like a tally chart when I'm taking a survey. Anybody think of anything else that you might do? But would you collect it in a pie graph? So a lot of I would not, maybe you wouldn't collect it in a pie graph. That would be how you would analyze it. You could also maybe do a Google survey, like the Google Docs, like when we were getting ready to have the our festive gathering for the holidays. I sent out a Google Doc and you voted on that and it tallied it. So maybe something like that. How would you describe your results from question 2 as a parameter for the population? Parameter. Does anybody know what that word means? So this is probably something that we need to understand. A parameter means to create a statement about most people in the population. So a parameter is to create a statement about most people in a population. So let's look at what that question asks again now that we know what a parameter is. How would you describe your results from question 2 as a parameter for the population? So let's go back and look at question 2. It says, do you carry a cell phone? There were 17 yeses and 3 nos. So what statement statement could we create about the population if there's 17 people in this room that carry a cell phone and 3 that don't? What would be our statement about the population? So most 7th grade students at RMS carry a cell phone. Could we apply that to other places, or is that just most 7th grade students at RMS? So you can't really apply and say that every 7th grade student in Georgia carries a cell phone. You have to think about what population your sample represents. And if we were just took a sample of 7th grade RMS students, then we could only describe the results as a parameter to our current population. So most 7th grade students at RMS carry a cell phone. Does that make sense? All right, let's go up to the top of the other side. For each of the problems below, answer the questions in regard to population, samples, and surveys. So now we're not thinking about our data anymore. We're moving on to a different set. After the 2000 census, the United States Census Bureau reported that 7.4% of Georgia residents were between the ages of 10 and 14. You remember a census in the United States is done every 10 years, and it's data collected about every single person in the United States. So, 10 was a parameter or a statistic reported. Explain your reasoning. Remember, a parameter is a statement about most of the population, and a statistic is just a number to study. So, if we're saying that 7.4% of Georgia residents were between ages of 10 and 14, was that a statistic or a parameter? We didn't make a judgment about most of the population, right? So that was a statistic. It was a statistic because it was reported as a specific percent. So remember, our parameters, you used data and made a statement about most of the population. We didn't just say most of the population of Georgia is between 10 and 14 years old. That would be weird anyway, right? That would be like they're running the state. 10 and 14-year-olds. So a statistic. What is the population for this survey? So if it is a census, from the United States, what's the population? Every single person living in the United States. Not necessarily Georgia, because it was a United States census. So the population is every single person living in the United States. I'm not sure that you change the context just because of one person's perception. You could take the word single out if you want. Every person living in, not Georgia, in the United States. And I guess we can take that out. person living in the United States. All right, let's look at our next situation here. The manager of the Mill Creek Mall wants to know the mean age of people who shop at the mall. Mean means what? Average. The average age of people that shop at the mall and the stores in which they typically shop. He hires Barker Market Research Company to collect the data. Dennis works for the Barker Market Research Company and has been put in charge of collecting data for the Mill Creek Mall. Dennis decides to interview 100 people one Saturday because it's the mall's busiest day. So think about his collecting his data. He's going to talk to people that shop at the mall one Saturday because it's the busiest day. We need to think about, is this a good way to collect the data? All right. 12. Is the survey a sample or a census? What do you think? It's a sample. It's just some of the people. So it's a sample. Sample because he only asked 100 people, not the entire population. 13. What is the population for this survey? So the population is all shoppers at this mall. So the data he represents or collects should represent all people that shop at Mill Creek Mall. So whatever he collects, he should be able to apply to all of the shoppers. Is the sample size for the survey appropriate? Do you think 100 people on a Saturday is enough to make a decision about every single person that shops at the mall? I don't think so either. I mean, I've been to the mall on a Saturday, and you would think that 100 people would walk through the food court in like 10 minutes. So I don't think that that is a good representation. I think it's probably too small. So do you think his results are going to be valid? If we think his sample size is too small, probably not. Do you think him taking this survey on one Saturday morning is going to make it biased or unbiased? Biased. I think it's going to be biased. Why do you think it's going to be biased?
Because it's not everybody, it's just the people who decide to walk.
So I feel like it was a convenient sample, right? I feel like it was a convenient sample. I feel like he didn't really go out of his way. I feel like there are people that shop during the week that he wouldn't be asking questions to. I think people that shop during the week would probably shop at different stores, because if he wants data about what stores they typically shop in, I would think older people during the week maybe would shop at different stores than other families on a Saturday. So I think that's going to change your data a good bit. All right, let's put that to the side, and we'll put it in our journal in just a minute. Let's look at this last paper. All right, so now let's look at this information about when surveys are biased and unbiased. So here's a little bit more information. There are 3 things to look for when determining if a survey is biased. Is it voluntary? Voluntary surveys normally only get people who feel strongly about the survey topic, therefore it would be biased. So that's one thing. Is it voluntary? That doesn't mean when people are standing in front of the mall and they ask you a question. Remember, that's not what we're talking about voluntary. Voluntary means you're volunteering to do some work. You're volunteering to go online, go out of your way, answer questions. You're volunteering to make a phone call. Not just someone walks up to you and asks a question and you answer. Voluntary means that you've got to do some kind of work. All right. 2, does the survey exclude any group? If your survey does, if it only includes a certain section or leaves out other participants, it's biased. And remember, biased is bad. It's not what we want. All right, last one. Is the sample size appropriate? If you want to make inferences about an entire city, for example, you only ask people on one street. Thank you. The sample size would be too small and not representative. It would be biased. So, is the sample size appropriate? You've got to make sure that you ask plenty of people. So, if you're taking a survey about an entire city and you just go to one street in the city and ask questions, that would not represent the entire city. You'd have to get a few people everywhere in all parts of town to make sure that your data is unbiased. So let's look at these following situations and determine if the sample taken is representative of the population without bias shown. All right, here's our first summary. ABC Family is a television channel that targets families and young adults to view their station. ABC Family regularly posts online polls to their website. In 2010, ABC Family polled their viewers to ask about airing rated R movies after 8 p.m. on their channel. Almost 200,000 people responded, and 85% of them disagreed with airing rated R movies. So, ABC Family is not ABC Family anymore. I forget what it's called now. But, Freeform, that's right. Okay. So, do you think they collected data without bias shown? 85% is pretty strong percent that they don't want rated R movies shown. But do you think their data is valid? So here we go. Let's go back to our flow chart. So, did they ask the entire population of viewers or did they take a sample? Sample. So we're over here. We're wondering if it's biased or unbiased. We're feeling like it was biased. What would be our reason? Was it a convenient sample or a voluntary response sample? Right, so it is not good, so it's biased because it was a voluntary response sample. This is something you should be able to do at the end of this unit, is you should be able to read some information about a situation and decide if the results are biased or unbiased and why. So you should be able to look at something like this at the end of the unit and go, that's biased, that's not a good way to do it, and here's the reason why. That's your responsibility or your learning target for this unit. All right, the next one. Mrs. Jones wants to know how 5th grade feels about recess time. Mrs. Jones labels every student in the 5th grade with a number. She then draws 50 numbers out of a hat and surveys these students. Mrs. Jones determines that 5th graders would like more recess time than they currently have. All right. Do we think that's biased or unbiased, and why? Okay, so James was giving us a reason, too, besides just yelling at me. He said it was unbiased, and then he told me it was a simple random sample. I think it may be more of a systematic. Why? She labeled every student in the 5th grade, and then she drew 50 numbers out of the hat. So I think that was more of a systematic random sample. So it was unbiased, so it was good. And it was because she performed a systematic random sample. The city of Smallville wants to know how its citizens feel about a new industrial park in town. Surveyors stand in the Smallville Mall from 8 a.m. to 11 a.m. on a Tuesday morning and ask people their opinion. 80% of the surveyed people said they disagree with the new industrial park. So decide if it's biased or unbiased, and you need to have a reason from our flow chart to tell us why. Emmy, what do you think? Yes, biased because it's a convenient sample. She went to one place from 8 a.m. to 11 a.m., right? So it's biased and it's a convenient sample. All right, last one. 4. The National Rifle Association, or the NRA, took a poll on their website and asked the question, do you agree with the Second Amendment, the right to bear arms? 98% of the people surveyed said yes, and 2% said no. Biased or unbiased?
I say it's biased because there are analysts of the gun.
Yes. First of all, it is biased. First of all, because it's people that are on their website. So normally if you're on the NRA website, you probably already have some strong opinions about the Second Amendment. And also it is a voluntary response sample. So I'm not sure that you could use that statistic and say, well, if 98% of the people said they like it, then that applies to 98% of the population of the United States, because I don't think that 98% of the population would agree with the Second Amendment. So that's biased. All right, so we've got to get this put in our journal, and let's see, what are we going to do? We're going to take this one. We're going to take this page and cut it apart, and it'll go on page 124 and 125. And then this page will go on 127.
I'm missing homework from 1, Ada, Otto, Faith, Aiden, Malcolm, James, and Wagner. I'm missing homework.
Yeah, Mr. Miller maybe tonight. It's in the book. Perfect.
All right, in your table of content, page 121 through 127, just put this over here for your pages, your page range, and that's going to be called surveys.